Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to the Writer's Haven. I'm your host, Helena, and today we're doing something a little different. You may remember back in March, our show covered the 2018 Annapolis Film Festival. We met a lot of great filmmakers, one of which was featured on our show. Today, you're going to catch my interview with veteran filmmaker Sam Pollard, best known internationally for his work with Spike Lee on Bamboozled, Clockers, Jungle Fever, and documentaries such as Oscar-nominated Four Little Girls, When the Levees Broke, and Acorn and the Firestorm. Sam is a gifted and phenomenal editor and filmmaker. I was able to catch up with him when he screened the Sammy Davis Jr. biodoc, I've Gotta Be Me. It paints the portrait of the legendary star through the kaleidoscope of racial politics in this country and how it impacted his life and career. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I enjoyed my chat with one of our most respected documentary makers, producers, and dream catchers. First question on the Sammy Davis Jr. film. How did you become attached to that film?
The Sammy Davis Jr. film was a film that I was hired to do. It was commissioned by a program on PBS titled American Masters, and the executive producer, Michael Cantor, reached out to me about 2 years ago and asked me would I take over for another director who had initially started the project, but had to leave. So I came in. They had already shot a few interviews, and I then did some additional interviews, and then went to post-production, and finished it like the end of 2017, near the end of the summer of 2017. Yeah.
Okay, and was there any personal attachment? Why did you agree to do it?
Well, I'm a young man of the 50s, and 60s. I grew up watching Sammy Davis on the Ed Sullivan Show and Hollywood Palace, in movies like Ocean's 11 and Sergeant's 3 and Robin and the Seven Hoods, TV shows like The Rifleman and, Archie Bunker. So I was very familiar with Sammy. I loved him as a singer and a dancer, an impressionist, as a comedian. I thought he was an extremely talented man. And I had read, when I was 15 years old, I had read his autobiography, Yes, I Can, talking about his trials and tribulations as a black performer in America and the struggles he had to overcome. And so all of those elements made me say, this is a film that I think I could do something with. I could dig into, I could find the layers, the complexity of the man, and tell his wonderful story.
So in doing that, when you're putting together documentaries and you're working with pieces that are already there, it's not something that you necessarily created. What approach did you take in, looking at all of the pieces and putting it together in order to meet the vision cinematically that you had for the film?
Well, first of all, a film like this, you have to do a tremendous amount of archival research. You have to see what's out there about Sammy. And fortunately, there was a lot. There was so much. Sammy was on every television show. He did a lot of, variety shows. He had been, shot doing shows in London and Paris and Italy and in Amsterdam. He was always everywhere. So we didn't have any trouble finding material. And the same was with the stills. There's so many pictures of Sammy Davis Jr. that was taken by other photographers, and the pictures that he took of other performers like Bob Hope and Marilyn Monroe and Nat King Cole. So we had this tremendously deep archive. And then, we had the help of his estate. And so when we went into his estate, we found all these audio recordings that Sammy had done when he was working on his autobiography, where he would talk and then, through a audio machine. So we had that too. And the thing that's fascinating about Sammy Davis Jr. is that he was a man who was very open. And so when he talked to people, he wasn't glib. He was really telling you who he was and how he felt and how complicated he was about lots of things. So with all of these elements, it gave us an opportunity to figure out how to shape the narrative arc. But one of the advantages I had with this film that I hadn't had with some other documentaries was that there had been a writer attached to the film before I came on named Larry Maslin, who had written a script. And his script became the template. And a lot of the structure of this film that you saw at the festival last night came from Larry's script. Now, we made adjustments internally, we recut and reworked certain sequences, but the template was there, so we had a leg up. and helping to shape the story.
So Sam, with the writer, he must have done some research in order to put the. So did you take that information and create your vision, or?
Yeah, exactly. I took his information, his template, and then I put my own spin on it. Because then I had done my own research. I read Sammy's autobiographies. I read other biographies about Sammy. You know, I read essays about Sammy. I watched all the old film, all the old footage, all the live performances. I saw things that he didn't have in his script that I knew that I wanted to use. You know, so it was, you know, when you're making films or when you're creating, you know, in this business, the important thing is to remember that collaborators are vitally important to helping you find your story, tell your vision of the what you're trying to do filmically. So, yeah, you know, to make it my own, I didn't have to take what Larry gave me and then twist it and give it my own spin.
Okay. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and just overall challenges?
You know, the overall challenge you always face when you're doing these documentaries about celebrity types or anybody, a biography, the challenge is what you need to leave out. Because you can put everything in about somebody's life, but do you want a 3 hour film? Do you want a film that's a 90-minute film? Do you want a film that's compelling, engaging emotionally? Usually the film that's going to be compelling, engaging emotionally should be not a 3 hour film, you know. So we knew that we had enough material to make a good 2 hour film. We had a 2 hour cut. We looked at it. It dragged in places, a little fat on some places. So we started to prune it and sharpen it, tighten it, until we got to what you saw last night, 100 minutes. You know, it's always a challenge. It's always the thing I love about making films, either documentaries or narrative films, which I've also done as an editor primarily, is the process. The process of trying to make these things come to life. Because that's our challenge, to make them come to life. So you, as an audience, says, "Wow, what an experience!" You know, sometimes some people will say, "Oh, what an awful experience."
Okay, so with the Spike Lee films, and you served as editor, and actually was Oscar nominated for one of them, for little girls. How involved are you in the actual filming and production?
On the features, not at all. On the feature films from Mo Better Blues and Jungle Fever and Clockers and Bamboozled, I don't think I barely went to the set. You know, they would shoot the material and give it to me in the editing room, and then I would screen it with Spike, and we would talk about things he liked and things he didn't like, and then I would start to shape it. You know, work the sequences. On the documentaries, I was very involved. I was on the shoots. Me and Spike would talk about the strategy in terms of storytelling and structure and how to do it. Should it have narration? Should we use a narrator? Shouldn't we use a narrator? What stuff should we shoot? What stories are we trying to tell? So I was very involved in all the documentaries that I've done.
Like when the levees broke?
Levees Broke, Four Little Girls, If God Is Willing and the Creek Don't Rise, the sequel to the Levees. Even this documentary about Jim Brown, the football player, Jim Brown All-American. So I was very involved in all those.
Okay, and what are some of the challenges in those instances with the features where you're not seeing it until you're in the editing room,
The big challenge is if Spike gave me some good stuff.
or not enough stuff?
No, he always gives you enough stuff.
Okay.
Spike, you never have to worry about too little with Spike. He is thoroughly focused and gives you enough material to edit. You know, even when he was only shooting with 2 cameras, he gave you enough takes and he gave you enough material to edit. The thing to remember about the feature films is that it's about who you cast. If you cast well, that's really a leg up. If you get a Denzel Washington or Wesley Snipes, that's a leg up. If you get Harvey Keitel and John Turturro, that's a leg up. If you get a Savion Glover, you know, and the Jada Pinkett Smith, that's a leg up. Feature films, you got to know how to cast well.
Okay, wonderful. On the Sammy Davis Jr. film, how long, I think you mentioned how long it actually took for the entire process.
From the initial idea to when you got finished in the summer of 2017 probably took 5 years. But I was on it for the last 2 years of it. Okay. For the rest of the shooting of the interviews and then the editing, post-production.
Okay.
Let me see. Are there any favorite projects that you've done?
Four Little Girls, I really love a lot because it's really touched me. I mean, a very important story about those four young ladies who were killed in Birmingham. Of all the Spike features, the one I probably am most attached to emotionally, I'm not sure it's the best of the ones I've edited. It's probably Mo Better Blues. I love Clockers. I've grown very fond of Bamboozled over the years. Yeah, I would say Mo Better Blues.
Okay, are there any filmmakers that you haven't worked with that you'd like to work with?
Everyone that exists. Sure. I mean, I'd love to have worked with Robert Altman or Paul Thomas Anderson there's so many great filmmakers.
Okay, and let's talk about Acorn for a little bit. Um, well, first of all, let me ask you about the timing of its release. Is there any significance in that?
I think it'll always be timely. I think a film like Acorn, quite honestly, will be timely every time is screened, because we're living in such strange and complicated times politically. There's such partisanship between the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, that Acorn is just right in the middle of that. It's a film that really is dealing with fake news and undercover, just trying to destroy an organization that was very important to American culture, American history, American social issues. So I think it's always going to be a timely film, very timely.
And would you say you were more so documenting versus trying to make a political statement in any way?
Yeah, we were documenting. I don't think of myself as trying to be a polemicist where I'm trying to make a political statement. That never has been my calling. My calling is to try to document a story, a social issue story, and try to see all sides of it. To make it complex. I mean, that's probably a part of. If anyone asks me what my unique perspective is about filmmaking, particularly documentaries, is to try to make a story layered and complicated. So it's not one way. So it's like when you watch Sammy, it's not like everything is about him so wonderful and great. He's showing the other sides of him, where he struggled with being black man in America, struggled with his relationship with white women, struggled with his relationship with the black community. I wanted all that. And the Acorn film does that too. It looks at Acorn, the outside forces that caused its destruction, and the inside forces that caused its destruction. That's what we wanted to do.
What advice would you give to an aspiring filmmaker that is looking to get into the business and get to the heights that you've reached?
I would say to aspiring young filmmakers, be it in documentary or narrative films, find a mentor. Find someone who you respect, who you think's body of work you can look to and say, I want to try to do that. Then, the second thing I would say is learn the craft. Whatever you want to do in the business, be it a camera person, be it a director, learn the craft. How do you learn the craft? You watch other people's work of those particular things, what they do. You look at work of cinematographers if you want to be a cinematographer. You look at work where the editors are important. You look at the work of the directors. Learn your craft. Then the third thing is you need to be dedicated and passionate and committed to wanting to make it in this business, because it's not easy. It's not easy to make it in this business. I've been doing this over 40 years. If anyone had told me I'd be sitting here with you and you be interviewing me about my body of work, I would say, yeah, right. Because when I started, I didn't know how far I could go, but I did know that I had a sort of love. I knew I had love for the business and love for the craft of making films. And I knew that by hook or by crook, I was going to make it as an editor. That was my first goal, to make it as an editor, to be an editor. Then my goal, after I became an editor, was to become a director, how to make it as a director. So I was always very goal-oriented, very ambitious, and career-oriented. I always wanted to have Spike has this attitude too. I wanted to create a body of work, And then finally, for me, the most important thing is to give back. To me, all this knowledge I have about how to make a film, how to tell a story, how to interview people, I love to give it back. I love to teach. That's why I became a teacher. I love to share what I have, because I'm not going to be here forever.
Who were some of your mentors?
My first mentor was a gentleman who I was his apprentice in my first film that I worked on. His name was Victor Koneski, Jewish gentleman, who's still a friend. I've known him for over 40 years. And he was the one who took the time when I was between the age of 22 and 25 to sit me down when he was editing. And he would force me to watch what he did. He would articulate in his own way why he made all his editorial decisions. And then he would give me little scenes to edit. And then he would rip them to shreds and make me re-edit. But he was my mentor. My second mentor was a gentleman who I met probably about 4 years after I was working with Victor. I got a job as an assistant editor with this black editor named George Bowers, who taught me that Victor was teaching me the aesthetics of how to be creative. George taught me about how to be professional, how to think in a professional way working in the business. So I worked with him as an assistant for 2 or 3 years. Then he moved to California and he started directing low-budget features. So he hired me, and I directed 2 films for him. I edited 2 films for him that he directed. And he was always talking about how to be professional, how to present yourself in a professional way. And the third mentor was this gentleman named St. Clair Bourne, who I mentioned last night, who was an African-American filmmaker, also documentarian, who basically made me understand that I need to remember where I came from, and that me as an African-American, I had to understand and use that and always be about telling our stories as African Americans. Because at a certain point when I first started my career, I wanted to deny that I wanted to be an African American filmmaker. I was in that mindset, I just want to be a filmmaker. I don't want to be labeled as an African American filmmaker. I don't want to just work on black films. But Saint made me understand that that's an important responsibility, to work on black films, to tell black stories, because if we don't tell our stories, who will? And we know that white people will tell our stories, but they don't know it like we know it, So those are the 3 important mentors in my life.
Okay, and there was something that you said last night during the Q&A process that was related to the process that you engaged in making the Sammy Davis Jr. film, and the people that you had interviewed, or at least tried to. I know there were a couple of instances where you had interviews. Right. The point that I came away in that, not only in talking about the challenges that you faced inherent in any film, but just in the persistence in ensuring that the story, in this case with Sammy Davis Jr., that you lifted the character and I'll use the word expose the character or his personality in a way that was honest and true to who he was. You just mentioned about us telling our stories and other people telling our stories and authenticity in doing that. And so I'm assuming then from that discussion that you already had some idea of how you wanted to present him. And I'm also assuming that the writer who initially put it together, the script that you took, you were in complete harmony with how you wanted to portray it and how it was written. Is that a true statement?
I would say there are probably things in Larry's script that I wouldn't have done, that I didn't do. There's certain points of view that Larry may have brought to certain elements of Sammy's life that I don't agree with, so I did change it. I think you always have to understand that anytime you take on anybody's project, if you're a director, you take somebody's script, you got to alter that script to your specifications. So
And you had artistic license.
That's right. You got to. If I was going to make Larry's film, Larry should make the film, not me. I'm really strong about that. It was, if someone says, it's like the other day, I was at a mixing studio, and the mixer said to me and this other director, "How do you guys like to work? I want to mix this other film I'm involved with." How do you like to work? He says, director he worked with before that we all know says the director likes to be there every day while he's mixing the film, tell him exactly what to do. I have the opposite reaction. I believe, and and this comes from me being an editor, I believe you get the best out of creative people when you let them do their own thing. If I micromanage you, then you're not doing your own thing. You're doing my thing completely. So then what's special about what you're going to bring to the table if I micromanage you? So it's like some people would say to me, well, I was at Toronto Film Festival and I was having dinner with these directors. Director, you remember that film Jane that came out about Jane Goodall? Yeah. I was sitting next to that director. He asked me, he says, how come you don't cut your own films? I said, because I want to see what someone else brings to the table. If I have this, and he says he can't handle sometimes not cutting his own films because he knows exactly what he wants. Well, I know exactly what I want when I edit too, but I also know too, to put it to you this way, when I edit Spike Lee's films, you don't hear me say, that's a Sam Pollard film. Because even though Spike doesn't sit over me and say, cut there, cut there, cut there, cut there, cut there, I know from the way he shot the material, what he likes, when he looks at my cut and critiques it and asks me for changes, that I know at the end of the day, when I recut those scenes, when I edit those scenes and recut those scenes, and Spike gives me his notes, it's going to be a Spike Lee joint. It's not Sam Pollard's film. So even though he's not in the room with me cutting, osmosis, you know.
But you two have worked together on so many projects that.
Yeah, but that's how it works, though. It's like the editor who cut Sammy for me. He's cut two other films for me. I don't have to sit behind him every day and say, Steve, cut here, cut there, cut here, cut there, cut there. He's going to do his thing, and he's going to sometimes, when I come in the room, sometimes he shows me something that he's cut. It's not going to be like I would do it. He don't cut like I would cut. There's nothing that Steve cuts in that Sammy Davis film that if I was sitting there physically cutting myself, it would be the same. It's just not that way. Now, there may be some times when we get to the final cut, I'll say, take 2 frames off that shot, or make that shot a little longer, or let's flip that shot around. But in terms of the overall feels, sure, it's my sense of pacing, but it's not exactly how I would cut it. If you're going to cut like me, I should sit there and cut it myself. Right. You know, it's like if a guy's going to shoot for me, and I say, no, I want you to shoot. Let me show you how to frame it and shoot it this way and shoot that shot and do it this. I should shoot it myself. The reason you have collaborators is because they're going to bring their own talent to the table. I believe that. I believe if I have to micromanage you, then I should do it myself.
Okay, well said. You've had a stellar career. And the film last night, the Sammy Davis Jr. film, I heard nothing but great things about it. It was truly, truly a wonderful film to watch. And I learned so much about him as well that I didn't know. With all of the work that you've done, any regrets?
Regrets?
Anything that you did that you wish you had done differently?
Probably, but who knows what they are. I've done something.
You're going to keep it in the vault?
Yeah. I mean, listen, you know.
Are there any projects that you turned down that you wish you had done?
You know, I quit Malcolm X. When Spike was directing Malcolm X, he asked me to be one of the editors on that film. And I initially said yes. But when he hired me, I had just also gotten a job to produce a documentary. And initially I thought I could produce that documentary, get someone else to edit, and at the same time work on Malcolm X. And 2 or 3 weeks into Spike's shooting, I was having such anxiety attacks that how could I produce this film and edit on Malcolm, produce this film and edit on Malcolm. So I called Spike up. I said, Spike, I'm going to quit, man. He said, what? I said, yeah, man, I can't do both. I got this other project. I'm gonna have to quit. Initially, he tried to talk me out of it. Then the other editor probably said, I don't need him anyway. So I quit. And I thought I had just cut Mo Better and Jungle Fever. And then I was going to do Malcolm. Then I quit. And I figured me and Spike are done. He won't, you know, he's not going to call me anymore. So then I finished producing this film. And then Ernest Dickerson, who I'd done Juice for, edited Juice, co-edited Juice, he was doing this action film with Ice-T and Charles Dutton and Rutger Hauer called Surviving the Game. Yeah, for New Line. And he called me to come out to California, and I cut that. And when I was finishing that film, one day, Spike's producer, John Killick, called me up and said, Spike's got a script he wants you to read. It was Clockers. So I read it, and I liked it, but I didn't want to do it. I wanted to go back to a doc, so I called John and said, John, it's a good script, but I'm going to pass. So then Spike called me up like a couple of weeks later and said, man, you don't want to work with me anymore? And I said, no, man, it's not true. I want to work with you, but I'm just looking to do more docs. So I get off the phone, I hang up, and I was living in Brooklyn, and I had this like light bulb, and I said, well, Spike wants to do documentaries. So what if I say to him, if you let me co-produce a documentary with you, I'll edit Clockers. So I called Spike back. I leave him a message. I said, Spike, this is Sam. I just had a thought. I know you want to make a documentary. You never made one. This is my offer. If you let me co-produce, and I'll edit the documentary, but if you let me co-produce a documentary with you, I'll edit Clockers. So Spike called me back and said, yeah, man, it's cool. That's what led to 4 Little Girls.
Oh, wow. That's such an awesome story.
This is career-minded. You see, I'm career-minded. I'm thinking, I could see how I could make some mileage out of that. Always been like that. Still now. I'm still that way. Career-minded.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with international filmmaker Sam Pollard. Stay tuned for more interviews from the festival in coming weeks. And until then, catch fire on purpose.
Here we go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. Gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Okay, quick. Oh yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. Yeah, Dad. We're getting so wet. Oh,
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.